Hello again. Thank you so much for joining us on Boss Moves and Benefits. This is President of Custom Benefit Consultant CBC and CBC. I'm going to be your host along with Robin Ball, CEO and founder. Joining us today is Brooke Frame, Director of Enterprise Growth, who joins us frequently on Boss Moves and Benefits. And our topic for today is going to be benefits for the modern remote workforce or workplace. And, as I thought about this, or as we all thought about this in approaching it, it just seems so top of mind, right? I think of it within the context of the pandemic and coming out of COVID. And it's one of the things that will never be the same, right? I know for us here at CBC, we're remote first, and pretty much everyone is working remotely in some form or fashion. But many of our clients and groups that we encounter are spread out all over the place.
So are we.
Right. As an example, we onboarded a new large account in 2024. They are Sidist in California. And I've interacted with them quite a bit over the last year and a half, and have not met a single person that works in California. I've met people in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Arizona, Texas, New Jersey, etc. But it just speaks to the fact that the modern workforce has changed. And I think for me personally, I think for the most part, the better. I look at it from the lens of CBC. It enables us to do a lot more from a recruiting standpoint, right? We're not limited to one geographic area. It enables us to do a lot more operationally. We're staffed literally in all time zones by way of people that physically live there, and not asking someone to get up at the crack of dawn to support East Coast when we only had offices in the Pacific time zone for the first 25 years of our existence, right? So, from this seat, I see those are the benefits. And I know lots of other people look at it a lot differently as well. So I don't know, Brooke, I know it's something that you've been really interested in exploring and trying to understand. I think a lot of it, because you want to be an effective consultant for our group. So, I mean, what are some of the things that you've been researching or accounting and contemplating, remote workforce today?
Right. So, I mean, with a majority of our clients, we do see that they either have, especially from the enterprise suite level, that they're seeking employees that are in other states. And so that's where this kind of conversation came up for me, is I wanted to really understand and know, okay, what are we seeing? What's the new normal, as we quote unquote used to say? But it's about 60% of the U.S. employers are now offering a hybrid setup. And I think that speaks a lot to how administrators are looking at hiring out if they don't have an actual location that these employees have to come to. Why do we have to have them commuting to the office? How can we meet them where they're at? And I think that speaks to flexibility, not only like in their work, but also their normal life balance, right? Some people have children at home that they're trying to balance careers and children and daycare and all of those things. Some people are looking after some elderly folks in their family and maybe live in a multi-generational household, which would make it challenging for them to commute and come to the office. So I found it really interesting of how we're going to support administrators and offer appropriate solutions to employees as they go forward in being in the work and remote environment, because it does change. Largely, I mean, speaking back to my personal experience, I've worked in offices, I've worked in operational locations that are high tourist level, and then having HR that is outside of that segment and having a lack of support there. So that's in addition to the challenges, is offering clients solutions that employees are getting well educated on the benefits that you offer, and not just kind of deploying them with a limited HR staff.
It's interesting though, because I think, in as much as I just told the story about the new client that we onboarded, it does vary. Certainly we have clients that have gone back, so to speak, or to your point, Brooke, that they're in a hybrid environment. But it really kind of depends on geographic location. It depends on industry. It depends on role. Depends on a lot of different things. But there is a demand out there for it, right? So another anecdote, we were having a conversation with the CEO of a state-based health plan. And as they got a year or so away from the pandemic, she was adamant that everyone should return to the office, and it's a building that they own. Why wouldn't we have people come back to this office? And what eventually happened there is they began to lose so much talent, and she got so much pushback and negative feedback regarding her, ardent, regarding her ardent support of having to come back to the office, that she eventually relented, went to more of a remote first approach, and they sold the building. So
Yeah.
that just speaks to, some of the trends that we see there. Robin, what are you observing in terms of remote workforce and trends that you see?
I mean, I think, we used to say we were really good at the messy stuff. And what was the messy at that time, we're talking about 10 or 15 years ago, is that it was multi-location employers, right? Where they couldn't have HR in every single office location. And I think the support structure that we built from that and have expanded onto it have really helped, this new environment and helped us support the new environment. There's two pillars, I think, when I'm looking at this. One is communications. How do you communicate, to this remote workforce? And we can discuss that. And the other is administratively. There's a lot of challenges for remote workforce. When you don't have HR there, and you also have very different people putting in data into payroll systems or administrative systems, they're not doing it the same way. Retroactive terminations, are a problem if they're not doing it the same way, or they forget that somebody's terminated. Leave processes are affected. And so I think what we've been working on, more importantly, is how do we help employers through all those pieces? So because we do the benefit administration either on our system or other systems, we can see if codes are not accurate, if terminations aren't accurate, if somebody has no hours and they're still actively at work. So I think that we're doing a big push and have been doing a big push to, on a weekly basis, or some senses as we get through API and it's daily. As soon as we see something, an anomaly, right? Somebody falls out of a class, or they don't have hours, or anything that looks like that, we can bring it to the HR, or benefit administrator at the client, and have them fix that record as soon as possible. I think that's really, really important. Leave processes, we have done a whole podcast on this, and we can definitely get this to you. But there's challenges there. The return to work is sloppy when they're remote work. Do you know that they showed up for work? And how do you know? They logged on their house. Did their supervisor see them working, et cetera? And so we've built special processes around workforce and return to work from our leave experience. Arrears is also a real big challenge. How are you communicating arrears to these employees if they had a baby and they turned to family coverage, but it was retroactive to the first of the year? And how are you going to let them know that you're going to take double payroll deductions, or maybe just one payroll deduction over 2 pay periods? So I think every single piece from an administrative standpoint requires another layer of touch, because you have to communicate directly to that person. You're not located on site with them.
I agree with that. I mean, talking just starting at communications, that pillar, it's so important that we're meeting them where they're at and having a style of communications that supports their workforce. So, for example, if you have the employees that maybe are not as technology inept, how are you getting their benefit communications to them? There's a few strategies that we look at, and we do email, text, and a personal phone call. In addition to that, when we're doing large open enrollment populations, we can do we call them robocalls, right? We distribute a recorded message to a large population set of employees. What kind of other communications do you think employers should think about or look at when offering the benefits?
I really like some communication apps that we do where all their cards are in the app and they can do push notifications. Email is less effective. Our SMS is definitely really good. I think that that's kind of where things are moving, as through text, because email gets kind of hung up. And we have a lot of folks, that are physician practice companies or casinos, that they're not sitting in front of a computer all the time. So push notification, or that text, I think, is probably, primary. some
With the
clients,
text messaging, though, we do offer an evergreen phone number, which I think that's critical, right? Because sometimes you get push notifications from phone numbers that you don't really recognize or you can't engage with. Whereas offering kind of an evergreen text service, which we do, is you're going to be able to save that phone number in your phone, text it, will respond to you within normal operational hours, but you can still text it at your leisure. So being a parent or something like that, and you're busy and you only have that 30-minute space, or you have your 30-minute break, you can quickly text the benefit center your question and then they'll respond to you accordingly.
and I think another one, Brooke, that I think you pioneered this one is office hours. You want to explain that?
Office hours. So yes, definitely. So essentially what the office hours are creating a kind of benefit center environment. We do this largely for open enrollment. So you can join in and go into what we call a breakout room. So you can sit with or virtually sit with a representative and talk specifically about your benefits we usually offer it for about 10 or 15 minutes per employee so that we can turn that around. So they register, they come in at their time, and then they can sit down and talk to somebody. And we find that human touch and that human experience is really good because one, the representative is always going to be on a Zoom or a Teams. So they're actually face to face with that person, and we require them to be on the phone. And I think in this digital environment and having remote workforce, it's so important to have kind of that human touch and that human experience when they're enrolling in their benefits.
So just kind of, backing out a little bit, and I think what I hear both of you saying is that, okay, we have acknowledged that the remote workforce is here to stay. There's such a high percentage of people that are working remotely. But as it pertains to managing a modern employee benefit plan, it brings with it its own inherent set of challenges, and that we've developed, or we possessed, and we have nurtured this suite of resources that really lends itself to managing a remote workforce.
I think contact center too is a big one that, obviously people are calling and texting us, but every single large group client that we have their own dedicated phone number, phone, email, chat, fax, SMS. And
Call it benefit phone.
Benefit phone. And we're also adding bot to that, which is, newer, which we can embed in any platform. So if you're on Workday or UKG or what have you, we can have a chat bot, located there, and it'll learn, over time on how to respond to really quick questions. And we're always right there, to be able to pick up the pieces if something is not cut and dry. Also can give you access to the back end systems where they can see, what they're enrolled in and payroll deductions and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think the comment on that in like chatbot or the use of AI and definitely utilizing and leveraging those tools. I always say set a low threshold if possible, or have your vendor set a low threshold so that employees, if they're trying to get to a human or a person, you kind of make that transition happen quickly. What I like to think too is just, again, drawing it back to that human experience and that human conversation, because you can ask the AI chatbot questions, but if you're sitting down and actually talking to somebody, they can kind of frame it in a way that's going to make it a little bit more useful. And we utilize those levers and tools not just for multi-location clients, but for some of our, say, clients that don't have a large HR base, or they, or can't service their employee volume. There's only maybe one or two people in HR, whereas they can call into the benefit center, create those relationships, create that trust, and get that human touch support. Because that, I think, that is a huge driver in some of the programs that we roll out from a communication and benefit administration standpoint.
Well, it's really the genesis of it, right? So, we kind of built our business. We started in Southern Nevada, Las Vegas in particular, in supporting the hospitality industry. And we had some large name brand clients that were multi-location, and then evolved to supporting other verticals as well that had different geographic locations. And there's just not going to be an HR person there. There's not going to be a benefits person there, right? So that's how we developed value, was developing these resources, be it benefit phone, access to a branded self-service portal, having dedicated folks to support all these functions and all these employee benefit plans, so that we became the resource and then we became their employee benefits plan. And so, and then for us, wanted to make sure that we had the redundancy and the ability to support multiple time zones, to build the ability to support multiple locations. Honestly, once the pandemic came, not to say that it was a non-event, but we really didn't blink. We went from saying wow, this sounds serious. We might have to close down next week, to being closed the very next day. And we really didn't miss a call. We were able to quickly pivot because we had those resources built in.
I think you mentioned benefit phone, but one thing that's unique, and I think especially for remote workers, is that most employee benefit books, you open it up and you have 20 phone numbers to call. You have your medical, dental, vision, HSA. You have 5 apps to download. And I think if you're isolated, you're at home, there's nobody you can talk to except for chat or online with some of your coworkers. That is kind of staggering. Like, where do I start in this mess? But our benefit phone only has one phone number. It routes to all of our vendors. We're usually number one, so we get the majority of calls. We do soft transfers, which means that we're trying to close that call out and resolve it on the single phone call and get the other third party on the phone with us so that our agent can definitely talk through those issues better than the member can and educate the member along the way of what these processes are. So I think that it has a big benefit for remote workers. And the other things that, we've been working on, within plan design, there's a lot of people that are very remote now. Sometimes they don't have dental access and we have to change, to do more indemnity style plans. Some people move out of Southern California to 20 acres. I don't know who would do that, but same type of support. So we see definitely a push and engagement in some of the apps to try to get telemedicine visits. Virtual care is important, whether it's wellness, mental illness, those resources within the health plan are also very important on top of, the communications and the administration.
So a good anecdote on the single point of access and the benefit phone. We had a client that asked us to support their health fair each year. And we would do giveaways, and they asked us to effectively kind of pop quiz their members as they came by our booth. So we would ask them questions about their benefit plan, who's your carrier, what's your deductible, what's your out-of-pocket maximum. And very, very consistently, it was difficult for them to remember what the deductible was, but they remembered what the benefit hotline number was because over time, it became a trusted and valuable resource for them. And they knew that that's the number that they could call to get those questions answered. And so, for better or for worse, they didn't need to remember because they had the resource to go to. But
they thought they were insured by it.
They thought they were insured by it.
You brought up something I think that's worthwhile in terms of kind of taking the conversation a slightly different direction. You're talking about telehealth or maybe different benefits that need to become embedded to take into consideration the modern and remote workforce. And so just kind of for Brooke and for Robin, kind of putting your consultant hat back on. I'll go to you first, Brooke. What else do you see emerging in terms of benefit offerings or inclusions that might be important to this emerging remote workforce?
Well, first and foremost, a lot of the buzzwords that we hear is wellness. Mental health is huge because we're talking about people in silos, right? A lot of times, maybe not interacting, especially if you're not like a customer service facing, or if you're kind of a project-based person, maybe you're not interacting with people. And I think that can have some challenges with their mental health and well-being experience. So some things that I see, that emerging trends, and again, meeting the workforce where it's at. This isn't going to work for all workforces, but kind of just meeting us where we're at. If we have a fully remote demographic, challenges can be super fun. They're hard to get engagement for, I think, like people who are experienced at locations, but like wellness challenges can be super engaging for people who maybe are just trying to, again, find that human connection, being on the workforce and joining in and doing a step challenge or doing some financial challenges. So we can work on those kind of platforms, I think, in order to create engagement and kind of create an environment where people are participating with each other. Something that we do is super fun we've done it the last few years post-COVID or even during COVID is the CBC is a very family-oriented environment, and we like to treat our clients like our family as well. And we noticed that gap in that human touch and getting together and having a meal. So we created these like seasonal events where one of them is like creating cocktails or doing something fun. Like what was the other ones that we did? They're kind of like you're locked out in rooms
Escape
together.
escape rooms.
Escape rooms, yeah,
virtual
right,
escape
exactly.
room, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I found those extremely engaging. All of our clients raved about it, and they're actually like, "Hey, this is kind of a team building event for us." So I think thinking about your workforce and engaging them in that manner, and it can be, it's hard to set aside a budget, but again, if you're not spending the dollars on your offices and rent and things like that, maybe adjudicating some of that to these online virtual team building experiences, which really draw the community together. Just speaking about CBC, we have different silos, right? So I might work with our large enterprise team. But we also have small group, individual, leave administration, billing. I don't get to interact with all those people all the time. So taking the time to put us in an environment where we're working together, laughing, getting to know each other, it just brings the team together. The other trends that we're seeing is accessible apps. So mental health apps like Calm, Headspace, or any type of meditative platforms, um, or engagement like that, that employees can quickly access. BetterHealth is also another one that is completely online. So finding EAP services or mental health services or applications that can be utilized in the digital environment can be, I think, really useful for employees.
I think that's important because there's so many digital tools that we have deployed that having that centralized contact center to support it is important because that, having the tool and paying for the tool are one thing, but we need the engagement, right?
Right.
And
right. How do you get them in? Yeah.
Yeah, there's some companies that are really good at that. We send out a lot of reminders, download, we put, especially implementing a new technology tool or digital tool. Once they download it, they can get, basically in a lottery for a watch or something like that. We've done a lot of engagement that way to try to get people to download the app, start the process, start to see, how they can interact with the plan and the folks. So I think that's really important too, to have some type of resources for digital tools.
Yeah, and you just see an uptick in kind of other sort of like benefit services like mental health days, things of that nature that are separate from a traditional sick leave that our employers are doing that aren't doesn't really, I mean, cost the employer that much, but it's something that you can offer the employees that, maybe they need a break. Because it is easy to, I mean, speaking for myself, it is easy in the digital environment and working remotely where you just kind of you wake up, you go to your desk, you have dinner, you go to sleep, you wake up, you go to your desk, and unless you're trying to like help the employees make sure that they're getting out, or that's why I like the step challenges and things like that. Hey, like, take a walk, leave your house, is really important. And with that, communications is key. We do see the email communications really work well too. I mean, newsletters, things like that. Once you get employees engaged in reading them and making them fun and impactful, and then they start actually picking up and engaging with the tools. Even one of our clients that isn't a remote workforce, we increased communications in the forms of emails and text messages around some of the perks within their medical plan. And in the last 6 months of running those engagements consistently, we have seen an uptick in participation into those types of plans and services.
The limited PTO has definitely been on the uptick with remote work too, trying to stop burnout. And I mean, you have those where you have to look at new folks coming on and make sure that they're doing their work at home in a remote environment. However, there's other folks that work 20 hours a day because they can, and, they feel the pressure of that they're always at work. So I think some of those strategies with the PTO have worked, to have better, I would say, balance.
Yeah. And I think that's where it comes into is trying to coach people through that. HR professionals thinking about coaching people through that balance and giving them kind of tools in order to have the appropriate work-life balance, even though, your computer's right there. You can just do another hour. No one's going to know,
Mhm.
Well, and then all of a sudden you're exhausted and you have employees that are kind of like falling by the wayside.
Well, I think of it just, my own personal journey, having worked in this, industry as long as I have, more than 25 years, and the way that many of us started, there's a reason that they call Section 125 the cafeteria plan, right? Is because we used to sit in the cafeteria, meet with each employee one by one, and help them fill out their paper enrollment forms. How things have changed, right? And so I think what I hear both of you saying is just the heavy emphasis and reliance upon technology and how we've had to, really think of new and innovative ways to make sure that we're engaging and interacting with everyone, regardless of their role and to the point, regardless of their location. So I think question for one or both of you, what do you think's next? Where do you think we're taking this in terms of interest and engagement for supporting remote workforces?
I mean, I'll take it. I'm going to go on the Ben admin side for my answer. So, Brooke, you can start to think right now. But I think building out really strong processes around remote work, like I was saying, looking at the data consistently in payroll to make sure that you're not missing someone, looking at leave, they're past FMLA and they're still on benefits that they get terminated and offered COBRA at that time. Other big processes on ACA that we've been working on, and even reverse ACA, I call it. Oftentimes with remote workers, they could go down to part-time hours and they still have full-time benefit eligible codes. And I don't think employers have the resources. We have one client that we're working on right now, and we're like, okay, you have over 400 people that are working part-time but have full-time benefits. Is that real? First of all, let's dive into the data. And then two, now what do we do about it that this is the case, right? And so now we created processes. Oh, and they have 400 folks, but they have 187 supervisors for those 400 people. So from a technology standpoint, we were able to automate notifications to their supervisor, to them, and say, hey, we're not working full-time hours this month. It needs to come up the next month or the next quarter. If most of them are on a quarterly basis that we've implemented with multiple touch points throughout that corner, letting them know that they're back on track or they're not on track. But that's really hard internally. I don't care what size company that you are, but how are you going to make those? You have limited, HR. How are you going to make those 400 contacts and 100-something supervisor contacts? So I think really honing in all of those processes and automate them is something that, we do well to support remote work.
Yeah. I think outside of the benefit administration pieces, I love data and I love organization, and I want all of our processes to be secured, clear, and through the line. Just to give an example, I had a client move to a different payroll company, and just trying to make sure that all of those instances of the payroll directions going over to the company, the arrears being taken if they need to, all those communication processes need to be sort of in line. I think that is your baseline, right? Make sure that you have all your Ben admin in place. You have somebody looking at the data, I think is inherently important because a lot of times it just kind of rolls through.
Yeah, you're not going to see them show up and work. You know what I mean?
No one's really auditing it to a point that is substantial, or oftentimes which is extremely important, right? Though it's kind of reviewing it every month. So I think first and foremost, start there. Secondly, I think, from a plan, I know that costs are going up across the board. We've kind of discussed this recently, just on individual benefits, employer benefits. Everything is just driving upwards, which can be challenging to look at offering valued benefits to employees. But I think the important thing and that people are starting to think of is, how do we meet these employees where they're at, and what do they actually need to help support them in their remote roles? And I think it's hard to come across initially, but again, I would always like to advocate for the human element, right? How are we going to make that person that maybe has a sick parent or something like that they're helping manage their care? What do you offer? Do you offer an elder care support outside of that EIP, that we can get a caregiver to come in and help that employee if they're having a tough day? Are we offering parental leave for both parents when they are trying to transition to becoming parents? Are you offering some reproductive health programs so that employees feel kind of catered to in that experience? I think all of that is inherently important, and it matters a lot. I was having a conversation over the weekend with some friends, and they were talking about their jobs and why they work where they work, and that's kind of what helps me think about this process a little bit more, and how do you create that experience for employees that are remote, because they're like, oh, my manager's great. They always give me the time off that I need. They'll cover my shifts. and that is you, it's hard to find somebody that works for you or with you in that manner, especially when you have kids or something like that. So I think trying to look at what you're offering to the employees, finding out what your employees actually need, and then finding programs that are going to support that.
So just thinking about CBC and how we position ourselves, and we think historically about the relationship that we've had with Costco and the CBC Health Insurance Marketplace for Costco members, and how Costco thinks about their members, that there has to be member value. So I think about that often, and that our role has to be that we are creating value for our clients. So kind of just overlaying that with the topic of the day, which is remote workforce. Just what I hear you both saying is, one, it's the resources and and technology that enables multi-channel communications, right? Not everyone's going to get an email, not everyone wants a text, and so but having the ability to support all those channels helps us drive that communication and that message. Two, it's process development, because you're not going to see Mike walk through the door because he's in a different time zone sitting in his office. There's got to be a process tied to making sure that we understand who's at work, when they're at work, how many hours they're working, and how that impacts employee benefits eligibility, tracking, reporting, ACA, et cetera. And then finally is products, right? Products and services that support a remote workforce that has evolved into something that looks much different than it did, certainly, if not 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago. And so, fortunately for our firm, these were resources that we developed before COVID and before the last 2 years. These are things that aren't new to us, right? We've been developing this type of environment and this suite of resources, for 20 years, just based upon the clientele, and back to our charge of maybe two charges, right? Robin's of we serve, and from my standpoint, it's always creating value. So I think that we're well positioned to support this type of workforce, and for folks that may be struggling with that, or struggling of how you position your benefits offering, relative to the new economy and the new workforce. I mean, that's certainly an opportunity for us, because that's someone that we can help.
And enjoy it.
Yeah, I enjoy.
Any other closing thoughts on remote workforce and supporting your employees that are working remotely, and how we can keep them engaged?
No, I mean, I would just say that each one of those processes are probably pretty unique to us. You know what I mean? And I feel like we've been on the leading edge of this for a long time, and, pre-pandemic for sure. But post-pandemic, it's just become that more important. The auditing piece, I think that Brooke brought up,
Right.
is critical, and it's not happening in the majority of the clients that we experience.
Yeah. Take it in. I think take it in 3 major steps. Step 1, figure out your processes. Step 2, figure out your demographic. And step 3, try to deploy meaningful solutions to your employees.
Well, thank you both, and thank you all for joining us on Boss Moves and Benefits.
Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you. Bye.